"Teacher, which commandment is in the law is the greatest?" He said to them, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind," with all you got. This is the greatest commandment and the first commandment. And the second one is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's where things get a little tough, right? If I was to ask you, do you love God? Everyone here, well, sure, I love God. I'm at Mass, all right? But what does that mean to say that I love God? What does it mean to say I even love anyone? Because we use that word in the English language. We use the word love very loosely. I love ice cream. I love golf. I love this. I love that. I love my... And we can lose touch. But this love that Jesus speaks of today is an act of the will. It's an agape love. At the heart of what Jesus is talking about, the essence of love, the love that Jesus preaches and calls us to do, there's sacrifice involved. There was a book that came out many years ago, and the name of that book was called Love is a Decision. True love is always looking out for the good of the other. And I like to preach that at every wedding. We did a wedding yesterday. And to talk about, okay, what does that mean now that you're married, that you love each other? It means I love you so much that I will your good. Even when I don't feel like it, even when I'm mad at you, I will the best for you. Our entire Christian faith can be summed up with one word: love. The Christian faith, the Catholic faith, it's more than just following a bunch of rules. That's what I used to think of it. Just follow the rules, check the boxes, and you're good. That's part of it, but really what's at the heart of our Christian faith is love. When you and I come before the Creator someday, we're going to be judged not on how many rosaries or masses or devotions I did. He's going to look right into the heart and say, did you love one another? That's what we're going to be judged on. And Jesus tells us in today's gospel that the whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments, the love of God and the love of neighbor. He teaches us that the love of God and the love of neighbor is one and the same thing. He took two laws that the Jews were very familiar with, and he combined them. He said, basically he's saying you can't say you love God if you hate your brother. St. John says that in one of his letters in the scriptures. He says, if you say you love God, but you hate your brother, you're a liar. Because Jesus has taught us they're one and the same. So to say I love God, I have to back up a little bit and say, okay, is there anybody in my life that I hate right now? That I don't like them? Jesus says, what you do to the least of your brothers, you do to me. So you can't separate God from his church. They're one. I was watching some YouTube videos of the conversion of a Hamas leader, one of the big leaders of Hamas. And this YouTube's a little dated. And I saw another one of a Hezbollah leader. Those of you who don't know who those groups are, those are terrorist groups that are very active in the war in Israel right now. Both of these men, at different times, had an encounter with the love of God in the person of Jesus Christ. Now, these are Muslims, right? And these two individuals were arrested, put into prison, and during their time in prison, Jesus came to them. And they were so just being in his presence, without him saying a word, just being in his presence, they were convicted in their hearts of their sin, of the hatred they were carrying in their hearts. The Hamas leader, I liked his story the most. He was talking about, he grew up in it. He said, as we grew up in this, all I've ever known is hate. I hate the Jews. That's what I was told. And now he's been disowned by his family, by his father, because he's converted now to Christianity. Both of them have. And the Hezbollah leader, what he realized after his conversion, his encounter with Christ, He says, I realize that we were not created by God to hate. God did not create us to hate people. If we hate somebody, that's far from being a Christian, a Catholic. Now, we all struggle with that emotion at times because people hurt us. They see things that are hurtful. They do things maybe. And we have a temptation to hate people. Now, it's okay to hate sin and to hate evil, to hate the injustice done to me. That's one thing. But I don't ever want to hate people. Because I hear that sometimes. Well, I hate President Trump, or I hate President Biden, or I hate whatever politics. It's like, okay, time out. What do you hate about them? Well, okay, maybe what you see in them is something that God hates them, but he doesn't hate anyone because we're all his children. Those two terrorist leaders now travel, they preach, and they share the good news. The Hamas leader, he said, I realized that I was hating somebody I've never met. He said, I never even met a Jew. And he realized how ridiculous, how irrational that was after his conversion. Like, how can you hate somebody that you've never met? And once he began meeting Jews and starting working with them, they realized that they want just what I want. And that's true for any group of people, right? The love of God and the love of neighbor. I cannot say I love God and hate my brother. So what happened to those two men? We use that terminology here a lot, encountering Jesus, and sometimes we can think, what the heck does all that mean? Well, there's a good example of two men who were filled with hatred, filled with violence, and after their encounter with the mercy of God, they completely flipped the other way. And now their hearts are full of God's love for the people they were hating and killing. Now they love them. Isn't that amazing? Only God could do that. When we encounter Jesus, we encounter God. And when we encounter God, we encounter love. Because St. John says, God is love. That's who he is. And isn't that amazing? These two men, Jesus didn't even have to say a word to them. He just stood there like this. And they both just like, they were convicted. And both of them just had this, they both said, I didn't know who he was. I just knew whoever he was holy. And I didn't deserve to be in his presence because of my heart. And I thought he was going to punish me. Because that was their view of God, that God's out to punish you. And Jesus, the only words he said to both of them is, I forgive you. And that broke their hearts. That's what they needed to hear. I forgive you. So when we encounter God, encounter the person of Jesus, it changes us forever. And then we're allowed to love the people that we used to maybe view as our enemies. It's only by the grace of God that I can love my neighbor. And who is my neighbor? It's everybody. There's a great quote from the servant of God, Catherine Darty. If you don't know if you ever heard of Catherine Darty, she's a modern day mystic. She's deceased now. She's a servant of God. This is what she says. Let every day be the day of beginning again, of loving Christ a little more, of hungering for him a little more, of turning our face to him. To accomplish this, all we need to do is to look at the person next to us. Look at the person next to you. You might be married to them. Might be your kids, maybe your parents, maybe a stranger. We must never forget that we shall be judged on love alone, and that there is only one way to love God and prove it to him, by loving our neighbor, the person next to us at any given moment. I repeat, turning our face and heart to Christ simply means turning to the one who is next to us at this particular moment in our life. If we do that, dearly beloved, we shall be saints.